Today we're talking with PreK DeAngelis. You know, sometimes history chooses us, and in this case, history chose you. Tell our audience a little bit about the challenges that you've had to overcome as a principal of Columbine High School.
I'll tell you, that's a day that changed my life forever. My secretary comes running towards the door, and I can remember it so vividly. She did a face plant in this little window. I knew something was wrong, and when she opened the door, she said, "Frank, there's been a report of gunfire." In the 20 years I was at Columbine, I could count on two hands the number of fist fights we had. And when I ran out of my office, my worst nightmare became a reality because about 100 yards away, I saw a gunman coming towards me with a long rifle. Everything just seemed to slow down, and there were things that were magnified. And as I ran out of my office, I thought I walked out very calmly, but with my secretary indicated, I ran straight towards the gunfire.
This is a continuing interview with PreK DeAngelis from Columbine High School. They Call Me Mr. D, Part 2, Episode 467.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
PreK, so many principals and so many teachers go through very difficult things. This is a new day, and it's heartbreaking. What is your advice to those who have the unimaginable happen at their school?
I can remember making a comment after the Columbine tragedy happened, and it rings true 20 years later. I joined a club in which no one wants to be a member. And so when I reach out to these other communities, going back to Red Lakes, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, most recently Parkland in Marshall County, in Santa Fe, when I call them and they pick up the phone and I tell them, "I know what you're feeling," they can say, "Yes, you do." And we talk about all the different things that could possibly happen. And the thing that I share with them, and it rings out so truly, is it's a marathon and not a sprint. And you're not going to wake up some morning and everything's going to get back to normal. But I assured them that this was just the beginning of a relationship, that I was going to be able to travel with them during this road to recovery. And it's interesting, a year later, been in contact with the four communities I just mentioned. And each time during a particular period of time, it's kind of a landmark. So, for example, last year I got calls from the high school. What do we do about the graduation ceremony? And then all of a sudden, what do we do first day back? Then I've got a call, what do we do at the 1-year anniversary? So we continue these conversations to see what we can do to get through it together, because we are part of this club. And I never say to you, boy, it gets easy. There's going to be some great times and everything seems to be going well, and then you hit a bump in the road. And you just need to learn to be able to have resolve in that you have this great support system in place. And I said, I'm going to be with them every step of the way.
So your book is They Call Me Mr. D, and you're all through the media and traveling the country, and you're working to support principals who have to deal with this tragedy. Do you have any words for those in education who are heartbroken by the fact that school shootings seem to be such, I don't know how to say it, just something that we're all concerned with these days? I mean, how do we live in this world today?
Well, I am a person that is very positive, and I don't dwell upon the negative. You know, I build upon the positive. And I know people say to me when I go out and do presentations, I said, "Frank, you talk about not allowing your beloved 13 to die in vain, but we continue to hear about these school shootings." But I said, what we don't hear about is how many have we stopped because of things we have in place. In 1999, the only drills we did were fire drills. Now, students from the early ages, intermediate, primary school, are learning about these drills. And we're not trying to traumatize them. We're just preparing them. The protocol that was used on that particular day at Columbine is no longer being used. We have officers that are engaging. And what I tell people is schools are still the safest place. And there's research, and this is about 2 years dated, but They said there's about 300 killings every day in the United States, and how many happen in schools. And so I think we need to be aware. But the thing that we can't do is when people say, we can't talk about it. Well, if we don't talk about it, it's not going to happen, because almost every community that I call upon, every community I visit, the first thing they say to me is, Frank, we can't believe it happened here. And so what we're trying to do is just be sensitive. We train our kids in California. If there's an earthquake, what are we going to do? We train the people on the Eastern Plains. If there's a tornado, what are we going to do? My own little granddaughter, who's 5 years old, I said, honey, if a stranger comes up to you, this is what you need to do. And so we're constantly telling our children, it's not to scare them, but it's just to make them aware. And I refuse to give up hope. And I speak to teachers. And, the thing that's so important is people ask me right after, what are you going to do? And I said, what are we going to do? They're all of our kids. And so where I get excited is when I go to these conferences and we have parents and we have educators and we have law enforcement and we have health workers. We're all in the same room coming up with ideas, which is going to make this a safer place for our kids. Because my parents are still alive at the age of 88 and 84. And if they had to bury me, their 64-year-old son, they would struggle with that. And so I can't imagine what it's like for these parents that have to bury their children. And something that haunts me, and it will until the day I die, is on the evening of April 19th, as parents were being reunited with their kids in this auditorium, there was a lot of tears, a lot of joy, but as the evening went on, there were fewer parents in there. And that's when a grief counselor came over to me and said, Frank, we need to take these parents in and tell them there's a good chance their kids lost their life in your school. And that is something that will weigh on my mind for the rest of my life, something I was never prepared for. And I made them a promise that I would not allow those children and Mr. Sanders to die in vain.
Well, Frank, good luck as you tell your story, as you tell the story of the 13, your precious 13, as you call them. You're really an example of resilience. You're an example that we are there for the children, of persisting. And there's so much more in the book. This is one of those books that you just can't put down. It's a fantastic book. The name of the book is They Call Me Mr. D. And Frank, thank you for telling your story and for encouraging us, because I'm also positive and encouraging. What we do is important. And those drills that we do, in addition to fire and tornado, they are important. Active shooter drills are important, and we need to do those. And we've done them at my school several times, and then we do debriefings and get better at it every single time, because these students are precious and we have to take action to protect them.
And Vicki, one last thing, the one chapter, if they don't read any of the chapters, read the last chapter, because it's actually taken from what the parents wrote about their kids. And it's very, very touching to learn about these kids and what they meant. And they were just fantastic, and they serve inspiration to me. So once again, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.